We are live and we're holding in the good stuff just so we can get to the show. It's season 4, episode 12. CC Ekeke is back on the show. Kalene Williams just dropped out. I don't know where she went. Lauren Moore's here. She's co-hosting with me tonight. Welcome. And everybody that's in the live chat, thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. Sorry we're a tad bit late. It was kind of a scramble to get on the show tonight. So, Kalene's back. Good.
I closed the wrong window because I'm brilliant like that.
One of these days, I fear I'm going to do that. Like, I'm just going to say, and we're live, and then click the wrong button. And everybody's going to be
we're not. And we're not.
Roll credits. So welcome, CC, back to the show. It's always a blast to have you, man. And we've talked about several of your series, and of course, we met in Vegas last year at the 20 Books to 50K conference, which was phenomenal. You're super duper tall, way taller than you appear on webcam.
Yes, I've gotten that. Well, it was Kalene. She's tall too.
Yeah, but I mean, she's even taller than I am. I'm kind of like, I kind of had to do this.
Right.
Which is really weird for me because that never happens.
You're just walking around and you're like,
what short people feel like.
This is what everyone else feels like.
Yeah.
Well, right now you're all this big, so same height.
That's right.
It's the equalizer webcams.
Which is good for Lauren because she's very small.
Oh, she's so little. She's bite-sized.
She's pocket-sized. Everybody in the live chat, thank you guys again for coming out and hanging out with tonight. I think it's going to be a great show. Scott Moon is working second shift tonight, so that's why he's not here. And Chuck has some family stuff going on, and who knows where Steve's at. He's off doing some Steve things. So I figure we can kick off this show by talking a little bit about what we had going on this week. And I would like to start out by saying that I got some really cool stuff in the mail today, which I'm going to do a little show and tell. So hold on. Wait for it. I was telling my daughter's doing something funky over there. You need to wait. So the first thing I got in the mail is this, which is the Hopeless
so pretty.
Author copy with my story in there. It's a very nice cover by Chris Kennedy. My story in there with Scott Moon's collaborative short story work there. So that was cool. And then I got this. I reached out to this guy on Instagram. It is Swine Gear Coffee, which is a play on the Cops Are Pigs montage, and so you can see
interesting. Okay.
But it's very pro law enforcement. This is why I thought it was funny, because you could see that the pig is a police officer. He's wearing these aviators and the badge.
It's kind of like taking it back and making it your own.
That's awesome. Right. This is ours. We're taking it. So I told him that we'd pimp his coffee on the show. You can get it at swinegearcoffee.com. I'm going to try it. My first batch is going to be tomorrow, but I thought that was really neat. I got that in the mail today, so I wanted to share that.
I don't know why the pig and the cop thing gets such a bad rap, because honestly, pigs are mean. They will eat you. So
they're smart though. They're really smart. They're smarter than dogs.
And so anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, and I love bacon, so like I don't even really care. Like I'll eat bacon all day long. So, but yeah, and the other cool thing is I finally sent off Edge of Valor to the editor. The final edits are done. The author notes, the acknowledgments, the dedication, all of it is done. It is now with the proofer, and then it will go on to Audible Studios for the audiobook production, and then a release. I think in June or July is when we're going to release. I finished that today, and I had to rewrite the entire last chapter. Just a minute. Completely changed the end of the book just to facilitate some stuff on the sequel. So that was fun. And so hi Chuck, welcome.
Hi guys.
Chuck just
hey Mr. Manley.
I just kind of slid in. How you doing, man? I just kind of slid in under the wire there because I set all this crap up, so I figured I might as well jump in and interrupt your flow.
True. Well, I'm going to run and take care of my daughter real quick. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Fantastic. What are we talking about tonight, guys?
News. What are we up to?
What are we
What's
up
the latest
to?
and greatest? What's going on?
The latest and greatest. With me. Let's see. I spent the weekend on the lake with my son at a rowing competition and got a little bit of. This is what I look like with skin tone. If anybody didn't know, because I don't get out much. And let's see. Brace Court over 3, clicking along. Started Child of Magic, the second Pigment Files book, and I've also started another urban fantasy project that I am kind of just playing around with at the moment. Not really sure what I'm going to do with it, but I have a super secret person that I'm sort of talking to about it. So we'll see what happens. The podcast version of audio for the first book of the Paragons trilogy should be wrapping up soon, and then that's actually going to go on sale through one of those places that sells audiobooks, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Podium?
It's not Podium. It's my narrator's kind of doing all of it, so I just sort of get updates every now and then. But and my grandkids are here visiting this week, so that's why I seem a little punch drunk. I've been chasing children all day, so that's really what's up with me these days. What about you guys?
Well, I just signed a contract with my cover artist. I'm super excited. Her name is Kristen Ingebrigtsen. Ingebrigtsen.
That's an amazing name.
That's
pretty awesome.
She works with HarperCollins and Thomas Nelson. She's done the cover for Chip and Joanna Gaines's Magnolia House book. And
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and she agreed to work with me, so I'm super stoked about that.
Awesome.
Because I know you're freaking out about what the art was going to be, who was going to do it. So I'm glad you finally found someone.
Right. I've been doing so much. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm working on book 2. That's barely started, but I've got the plot figured out, and I'm working on the first scene, and I'm excited to see.
Do I get to see it?
Yes, you will.
Breaking it in.
Just when? That's the question.
Nice.
Well, Kalene, did you give us your rundown of what's up with your life and what's happening and shaking and going on?
As far as writing goes, it's pretty much the same. I'm working on the next anthology for the space opera because I don't want to squeak in like almost late. I don't like being that close to a deadline.
What space opera anthology?
For Keystroke, the next one's going to be space opera.
Yes.
I want to get a head start on that one.
I think it was Douglas Adams that had my favorite quote about deadlines. I really love deadlines. It's the whooshing sound they make as they go by.
Right. They're not my friend at all. So
but you're working on that, huh?
Yeah.
They hold our feet to the fire, so that's a good thing. If there's no deadlines, we wouldn't get anything done.
It's true. This is also true.
This one you better get done because I'm editing it, so I want all.
Boom.
Yes.
Boom.
Yes.
I will do something for that one as well.
Wonderful.
I did not understand what near future was, so that's why I didn't do anything for that one because by the time the deadline reached me, I was still going, is this cyberpunk or is it techno thriller or what the hell is it?
I kind of went like that's where I kind of went in that direction with mine, with kind of like more cyberpunk techno thriller.
Yeah, I dig cyberpunk, man. I was a big William Gibson fan back in the day when all that stuff first kicked off. I loved it.
You know, that was the single biggest question I had about the near future anthology was, what does it mean? What's near future? Come on.
It's a little hard. It can be hard there.
Yeah.
Genetics
well,
are hard.
My whole thing, I thought about the watches everybody wears that, counts your steps, and they're like the workout watch thingies.
Oh, the Fitbits.
The Fitbits. So I was like, what if Fitbits were, the eye in the sky's way of taking over the world? And then I went from there.
Well, you know what? It's funny you say that because I had this, and this has no basis in real science whatsoever, but the idea that I was playing with was what if all these millions of people around the world had these little Fitbits and these little Apple Watches and all this stuff, but they were all very tiny components in one massive global EMP.
Ooh.
You know, and there's some big mastermind sitting back there just waiting until enough of them are in circulation to hit the button and shut everything down.
So he's just sitting there in his chair in some high tower, drumming his fingers,
petting his white cat,
long beard,
stroking the scar over his eye,
twirling his mustache.
Yeah, all
ready
of that.
to hit that button.
Yeah, just
that was Inspector Gadget's arch nemesis plan all along. He's just waiting.
That's it. That was the Apple. That was Steve Jobs' whole deal, but he died, and then somebody had to take over, and they're carrying on his grand ambition of global domination.
Oh, Zuckerberg?
Yeah, one of them. It's like a cabal of all of them got together.
Kind of, sort of is. These tech oligarchs taking over.
I had a preview of that cover, and now I can't find it.
What?
Yeah.
For shame. I'm kidding.
I know it. I've been looking this whole time, but I know I have a preview of that cover somewhere.
You're such a tease, Josh.
It's done and it's really cool. I can tell you that. It's really cool.
Well, 16, what are you doing, man? What's up? Okay, first of all, we've never met officially, but I understand you're supposed to be very tall. How tall are you?
Tall-ish.
I mean, you're roughly the same size as everyone else right now, so I can't really judge.
So on
Chuck,
me, you weren't in Vegas?
Like no, I haven't been to Vegas yet. I can't. My wife won't let me take my testicles out of her purse.
Oh, touche. So yeah, Chuck, I'm about. So Chuck,
this is why I love having Chuck on the show.
Yeah, I'm about 6'6".
Okay, that's good. That's respectable. I'm about 6'2" myself, so I was
so you're tall, right?
Yeah. So we're all good. We'll look down on all the other little people.
Oh, that's
hey, really quick before CC breaks into his before CC talks about what he's been up to, you guys want to see the cover?
Yeah.
I found it.
All right. Show
which cover? Whose cover?
Only here. The near future
near
cover.
Future anthology.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah, let's see it. Yes, let's do it.
Wait for it. Waiting.
All that.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Still waiting.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. Here it is.
Don't do that.
Oh, wait. Oh, wait.
We gotta lock that in, man.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's awesome.
So pretty. I need to write this down because you've told me like 4 times what the title is, and I keep forgetting. Horizons Beyond.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good, man. I like that a lot.
That's a good one. I like that. That's really cool.
I like the washed effect of the colors and stuff. It's like a watercolor painting. It's pretty neat. I like that a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, I like.
Cool. Very cool.
That's real good.
Boom! You saw it here first.
You add snow. It's totally
even better.
Totally story.
Yeah. The only thing that is missing is the author names, which this was made before we had all the exceptions set out, and then I just haven't added the names yet. So.
No, I like that a lot. Dude.
I like it. Yeah.
There you go.
I know.
Good stuff.
It's gonna go gorgeous next to this one.
Yes. Very cool.
So CC, what have you been up to, man?
So the main thing I've been working on is my new series, and it's called the Pantheon Saga. And that basically it's a superhero series, and it takes place in the wait for it, near future, and like present day near future, present day near future. It takes place, at least the first book takes place mainly in 2 locations. It takes place in St. Louis. It's a little ode to, I used to live there like years ago, and I loved it, so I wanted to give a little love to it. And then it takes place also in a fictional Central Coast California city called San Miguel, and San Miguel is where two of the 3 POVs are, and so you have 3 characters. One of them is a reporter, and she initially is kind of like she's your gateway into the superhero world because she has more access than the 2 people who have superpowers. Then you have one guy in St. Louis who he basically has like gravity type powers. And he's just a normal guy. He's not a hero. He's not anything. He's a normal guy, normal life. And he's dealing with these powers he can't really control. And then you have another person who he starts off normal. He's a teenager in San Miguel. And he follows some of the typical tropes that you see in a lot of superhero stuff. where he's kind of a little bit of a loner, maybe has like one friend, and is pining after this, I call them princess on a pedestal, this kind of perfect teen beauty queen. She's a popular girl. And he lives in a world, like, you see a lot of familiar archetypes to characters that you've seen in comic books. Like, you see a Superman archetype, you see a Wonder Woman archetype, you see an Avengers type archetype, you see a Batman type archetype. And I kind of have a little, and the thing about it is that even though it starts off in some, familiar grounds, I kind of have a little more fun with it because I base it a little more in like, this is kind of like, what if superheroes existed in like reality? Yeah. And when you think about it, you'd have different tiers, kind of like how you have celebrities or like actors or musicians. You'd have different tiers in that, where you'd have the big dogs, the government, like kind of like the government sanctioned / kind of independent heroes, kind of like the Avengers or Iron Man or who's the person I'm looking at, like the Justice League. They're government sanctioned, but they are still celebrities and whatnot. Then you say you have the corporate sponsored heroes, and those would be people who are like, think of it like this. Let's say you had, I don't know any teen people, but I'll think of the people like when I was younger who were teens. Like, let's say you had like the Jonas Brothers, Taylor Swift when she was a teenager, Justin Bieber when he was a teenager, and they were like on one like superhero team. How annoying would that be? They'd be superheroes. They'd be superheroes. They'd also be like,
I think you're kind of describing like a Booster Gold type character.
Yes, Booster Gold. Thank you.
He's all about putting himself out there and endorsing products.
And they endorse products.
Right.
They endorse products. They have like a music contract. They have like a TV show, like a reality show. Kind of like,
was that like the ShamWow guy where the superheroes got the microphone? And was like, ShamWow!
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of, and that the background of this world, and you see these superheroes. And so we follow the story of these characters as they go through. There's a huge event that happens about, I'd say, a couple chapters in that completely alters the course of the story. And the three characters are linked by it, even though they don't know each other initially. But the overall, I'd say, series arc would be eventually the two guys, the teenager and the guy in St. Louis. They get their powers, they rise up, and then eventually they will become each other's greatest nemesis.
Oh, nice.
Nemesis?
Nemesis.
Where the villainy comes in.
Yeah, and so that exactly, and so that's where that comes in. Because interestingly enough, at the end of book 1, you don't really know who the hero or who the villain is going to be. It's kind of like murky. It's murky, but by the end of book 2, definitely know. It's like, oh yeah. There's no going back from what that.
So you're not really doing like an origin story kind of situation. You're diving into an established world, or is there going to be a character?
It's an established world, definitely an established world, and I give some hints in terms of the world, like what happened, how it came to be, and there's definitely like, oh yeah, there was this being, there is when these heroes, when superhumans emerge, when this hero is a thing, and the Avengers of this world have been around for a while, so they're kind of like have gone through different roster iterations. There was of course a golden era. I call it, they were the Sensational Seven.
Nice.
And kind of like the Magnificent Seven. And so that was kind of like, and this team, even though they're still good, they've been kind of coasting.
Or the Fabulous Five.
Probably not. Probably not.
You're right for the straight guy.
So the overall plan is, for the first half of the series, it's kind of establishing the hero and the villain as to who they are.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, okay, he's established, he's come out. Because we're seeing, even though this is an established world, you're seeing the origin of these two characters.
Right.
So you're seeing like, okay, this is how a normal kid, a teenager who lives in the world of superheroes, this is how he puts on the spandex and becomes a hero.
Okay, cool.
Oh, did I just spoil it? Did I just spoil it? I might have spoiled
it. Not at all. I think the origin story is kind of a linchpin of the whole superhero genre. I think people actually kind of expect, at least even if you have a main character who's you're not so much doing their origin story, maybe they're helping somebody else through theirs, but I think a lot of time readers in that genre, they really like to see how the hell did all this happen? You know what I mean? How did this person end up putting on the costume, going good or bad, whatever. So yeah, I think origin stories are awesome.
And so the idea for this came from, like, I was a huge comic book fan for like years when I was a kid. And it was just, I think when I initially was writing Star Brigade like years ago, I think it was like, wow, this was probably like a decade and a half ago. And I was wondering to myself if I had another series in me, because I was like, Star Brigade, I love it, but I was like, can I put that much into another series? And then I think one day, I think I heard about Astro City, and Astro City was done by Kurt Busiek, and Alex Ross did some and I kind of I didn't really read into it, but I read kind of what it was about. I read some of the plot lines, I read some of the characters, and I thought that would be a great thing to do as a book. You know,
I got 3 of the graphic novels right here.
Oh wow! Yeah, I need to read those. and the only reason I didn't get to it right away, because I was still writing the first 2 Star Brigade books, and I was so excited by it. I'm like, I got to put this on the back burner. I'm going to jump on it. I don't want to be that guy who like doesn't finish any book. So I kind of focused on Star Brigade first, and it was good because Pantheon kind of evolved as I was kind of, throughout the years. It kind of evolved. Didn't know, like, okay, heroes in kind of a grounded reality. What else was there? And then little by little, I started seeing kind of more things that I kind of got inspired by. Like, I think the crux of the feud, the eventual feud, and this is not going to be like a Smallville Lex Luthor Clark where they know each other. These two don't know each other from Adam until they meet. I wanted to do it the way they did in Carnival. It was that HBO show where it's like you have 2 guys on, like, during the Dust Bowl, separate parts of the country, and they're going to become each other's greatest foes. And I was like, oh, that's great. And I actually, even more so, there was an idea that I came up with where I came up with a script idea because I was so tired of the crappy Superman movies that would coming out. And so what I did was I wrote, what if you had a trilogy of Superman movies? And then the first movie is you see the origin of both Lex and Superman. So that way it's like you see the Lex that everyone grew up in suicide slums, killed his parents with a bomb, and then used that patent money to become, like, to get his first invention. And then at the same time, you're watching Clark as he grows up. And then you're seeing both of them in their journeys initially for like maybe the first half of the film.
Right.
And you see Lex become this tech mogul mastermind. And while Superman is around the world kind of helping people, honing his powers and doing it in secret, Lex is kind of keeping an eye on him.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things I'm going to start doing with this series. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, bro.
No, go on.
I was going to say, I like that idea of like the dual origin stories, where because like you're using Superman and Lex Luthor. I was actually thinking Batman and Joker, because Batman gets such a really good setup and an origin. Like Batman Begins had like a whole movie of setting him up to Batman, right? But then you get Joker, and it's either the Jack Nicholson Joker where he just falls into acid and then he becomes Joker, and then that's it, we're done, or it's the Heath Ledger Joker and we don't know why. He's just there. Yeah. And so I like the idea of having Joker and Batman at the same time from beginnings, and then like
I'm really interested in what they're going to do with this Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie they've got coming up in the future. Lord. I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, you know what? I think once they got rid of Snyder, then things have improved vastly. As you can
agree wholeheartedly.
But going back to the Superman origin, one of the things that I would have liked him seeing is let's see the hero make some mistakes. Because I think a lot of times in certain things, it's like, oh, he gets powers, he's going to be a hero. What if he screws up and he kind of doubts himself? Like, should I even be doing this?
Yeah.
And you don't see that a lot. And I think it's humanizing these characters, showing them stumble, and then showing them as they kind of eventually become what they were meant to be. And the goal would be, again, the first half of the series, the establishment, and then you see kind of hints of them kind of being slightly aware of the other person, but it's kind of in the background for them. Like, okay, I've heard about you here, and then maybe at the end of the first half of the series, okay, I know who you are now, and I'm coming for you. And with the villain, I think was that a little creepy? And with the villain, I think it's finding a way to show that in their mind they're right.
Yeah.
Even though they're not right, they're crazy and they're evil and they're bad, but in their mind, they're right.
Yeah.
And this is not about trying to take over the world. This is about what exactly is their goal? What is their grievance? And what are they hunting? What are they after? And why does that bring them in conflict with the hero? Because a lot of times when it comes to like the villains who want to take over the world, keep thinking back to this. This is going to be a weird reference, but this episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the original cartoon back in like the late 80s, early 90s, where there was an alternate universe. Like, what if the Turtles never existed and they went to this reality and the Foot Clan had taken over the world, Shredder had taken over the world, and he was miserable because he's just an accountant dealing with all this stuff and everything sucked. And that's every time I think about when it comes to taking over the world. It's like, why would you want to do that? It's so much easier when you can either be puppet master, letting other people do the work, or you have a specific goal. And that eventually, by the end of the first half of the series, the villain will have a goal. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm aiming to do. Yeah, it's going to shake up things.
It's always interesting to me when people create like really, like when they really sit down and think about what they want their villain to do. It's like, instead of just having like a ha ha ha, I'm going to take over the world, like you're saying.
Yeah,
because everybody, like I can't remember who said it, but in everybody's mind, they're not the bad guy. So every villain in their mind, they're not the bad guy. But like you look at
the hero, the story.
They're hear their own story. But you look at like Infinity War, right, and Thanos. The way the writers wrote that movie is that they wrote it specifically as a hero's journey for Thanos.
Yep.
Yes.
And so if you look at it as Thanos is the hero and everybody else is the villain, like Thanos wins, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, he does nothing in any one, and then he can go off in the sunset. And like in his mind, he's absolutely correct. And so
And you're right, because I think if they had made him the original incarnation, it might have not worked as well. It might have even been laughable. Right. Like, he's in love with the concept.
Yeah.
But how they did it, because initially when they said, because I remember the whole thing about him wiping out half the universe, that was just on a whim to impress Death.
That's exactly right.
He wanted to get the Infinity Gauntlet. I'm going to go nerd on you guys. Bear with me. He wanted the Infinity Gauntlet and all the stones to basically impress Death, so he could be a consort to Death. And she was still kind of doing the Mariah Carey, I don't know him. And so finally, it's just like, you want Death? I can give you more. I can wipe off half the universe now.
I mean,
he was crazy.
Okay. I'm gonna geek out right here with you, brother, because I remember reading that, and he's got that skeleton propped up on the throne, but he sees that beautiful brunette woman, and that's Death.
Yes.
But everybody else, all his little minions are like looking at this thing like, oh wait, what is this? What is this? Is he, you know? But you're right. The whole thing about knocking out half the universe was just to impress this incarnation of Death that he had created. And I agree that I don't think that would have worked cinematically. You know, I think the Thanos from the movies far surpasses the one that they did for the Infinity War series.
Yeah. And you know, from a certain twisted point of view, even though he's, you know, crazy and he's wrong, he's thinking like, I'm trying to help people. I've seen what happens when there's too much and there's not enough. So this is my ideology. This is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, no, and he is, and honestly, there's an argument to be made there. I mean, you know,
no, you're right. You're right.
It is a horrible, horrible solution to the problem.
Absolutely,
it is a solution. You know,
and that's basically what, and that's kind of what I want the villain eventually to. That's his arc. Is that yes, there could be an argument made to be what he's talking about. But he's doing about it in a horrible way. And it's just like, no, not the right way, dude. Very, very terrible.
So if you guys start seeing Chuck have some little jewels on his bookshelf, like we need to start doing something.
Yeah. And so
let's talk about the show sponsor real quick before we delve into some more geekdom. You guys were way above my level. Like, so a lot of times I'm like, man, I'm such a nerd. And then I listen to Chuck talk and I'm like, God, I'm not a nerd at all.
Yeah. Nice.
Speaking of nerds, this week's show sponsor is by Scott Moon and Jeff Chaney. It's The Reaper Book 2, Fear the Reaper, in the Last Reaper series. If you guys haven't read the first one, The Last Reaper, it's phenomenal. Scott Moon and Jeff Chaney. This series is really good. If you've ever wondered what Scott is like in his own mind, read The Last Reaper, because that is Scott like to a T. Like you've heard me mention the Scott rage. You have not. If you read The Last Reaper, you will experience Scott rage, and you'll never even have to see Mad Scott. You could just read the book and you will understand the Scott rage. So this week's sponsor is book 2. It is Fear the Reaper. I'm going to put I was going to put the thing in the live. There it is. The link is in the live chat now for book 2. If you haven't bought the first book, you need to do that. But the second book is Fear the Reaper. Am I going in? All right. New enemies, unlikely allies, a neon city in the Deadlands that never sleeps. Halek Cain has mysteries to solve, people to rescue, and a vendetta to carry out. But he must fix his Reaper augmentations before they kill him. He needs raw materials from Gronic, a technical specialist on Roxo III, and time to put himself right before the Union comes for him. Everything seems like it's going to work out until he learns Elise is in trouble. If Cain doesn't get to her first, everything that happened on Dreadmax will have been for nothing. The Last Reaper will encounter assassins, Union special operators, and a mysterious rival from his past. The odds are overwhelming, and the enemies are mounting. But when all is said and done, each of them will learn that you must always fear the Reaper. Oh, that gave me goosebumps. Go and buy the book, guys. It's
Nice.
This series is really cool.
Right now.
Do what?
I said I wish I could cue up that Blue Oyster Cult song. Don't fear the Reaper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the Renegade Star Universe spin-offs too. Yeah.
That is right. It's in the Renegade Universe by Jeff or J.N. Chaney rather. The cover for this book is freaking badass.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
Like, it's one of the best covers I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of covers.
It reminded me of Sigma, the villain Sigma from Mega Man X. Again, another geek thing, but I don't care.
Yes.
When I thought I was like,
geek show and just talk about all things geek.
Exactly. And literally, the first time I saw it, I was like, dude, it's like Sigma, right? When you beat all the other bosses, it's awesome.
All right, let me clear that. Okay, so, the series that you're writing, that it's not out yet. When is book 1 going to be released?
It will be out next week, Wednesday, the 3rd.
It's a good day.
Wednesday,
yeah.
So are you doing a rapid release with this series, or is it just going to come out as it goes, or where do you stand on it?
So I'm going to do a rapid release, at least for the first 3 books. So I'm going to release book 1 next week, and then late April I'm going to have book 2 on pre-order actually around the same time, and then book 3 will come out in late May, and then book 4 I'm going to aim for June, July at this point. I was going to do it earlier, but I kind of got a little delayed on it, but probably about June, July.
Is this going to be a 4-book series or a 6-book arc?
I think it depends. It depends on how this does. Like, if the first 4 books do really well, I actually would like it to be an 8-book series, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, but if it does, if it does okay, then it'll be like 4 books, and it'll be like I can close up the series right there, and actually have like a lot of spin-off ideas too. Because if it's a superhero universe, it's like
all sorts of things you can do in there. Yeah,
all sorts of things. Yeah, and I think also another reason why I did this series was even though I loved comics back in the day, I think nowadays, like, the universes for the big 2 have become so convoluted and just so ridiculous with the reboots and the sagas, and this is going to change everything forever until they do another reboot. And I was just kind of like, I kind of did it the same way I did Star Brigade. like, I want to write a superhero story like I'd want to read.
Right. A good old-fashioned superhero story.
Exactly, but it appeals to people who like those types of stories.
Right.
The one thing I will say is that, and I'm not sure how people approach this, but I put a warning at the end, is that there definitely is swearing. So it's not just like crisp and clean, no caffeine. There's actually people swearing and using adult words. And but it's not. Well, you know, sometimes, trust me, even with like my other series,
Oh,
I've had
my
pearl clutchers.
Lanta.
Yes, I've had people clutch their pearls and be like, oh my goodness, he said, like, somebody actually counted how many times I said, you know, shit and fuck. And I was just like, really? Okay, sure, okay. I mean,
197 times.
And it wasn't even that much, but it was just like, wow. So this time I'm saying in advance, like, in the it's like, warning, this may have swearing. Yeah, you saw that. It may have swearing and big damn action. If you don't like swearing and big damn super action, this is not for you.
A language trigger warning. Nice.
I was going to say, it's very interesting to me. I've looked at a lot of blurbs on Facebook or Amazon over the last week, and I've seen several that you get down to the blurb, and probably about 50% of the ones that I've have read have those warnings, like mild sexual situations, or this could contain language that might be offensive, or somebody loses their big toe in an industrial accident. Like when I grew up reading books, I never ever thought about, is there a warning on this book that I shouldn't read this?
That's
book?
almost like a spoiler, in my opinion.
This is the caution: contents may be hot on a hot pocket.
Yeah.
No,
sorry, that's probably the best summation of that situation.
That is great.
First of all, hot pockets piss me off because I read that warning every time, and every damn time I burn my mouth. Every time.
Yeah, I think the first time I started seeing those was when Michael Anderle was releasing his series, when he first started doing the Arthurian Gambit series, and he was putting those on there. And then it's like, I remember just more and more as I was kind of looking through, just not just my reviews, but other people's reviews. And I was seeing people just like, you know, even if they like the book, they give it like 2 stars or 1 stars because, you know, language. And it's just like, oh God. So it's just like, hey, I warned you. I warned you.
Like, I get it. It's kind of like the Motion Picture Association, where they're like, it's rated R for adult language or whatever. Okay, like, it makes sense. Yeah. But I remember going into Barnes and Noble and buying like Aliens or Predator, the book, and going, I wonder if this has swear words in it. It's an Aliens book.
That's how their minds filtered it. So
yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm just giving you an advance warning.
I think it would be really cool to like write a book and put all that shit at the bottom of the blur of the description and everything, like this warning, that warning, but have none of that actually in the book.
That'll be great. That'll be great.
They give you a 1 star. This didn't have any cursing in it at all.
Exactly. I would put like 1 star. May contain explicit sexual situations, and then like have it be completely non-sexual.
Fade to black. Fade to black.
And just watch the people in the reviews be like, there was no hardcore sex in this book whatsoever.
Yeah, you would get complaints.
And I would ask in them. I'll be honest with you.
And be like, give me some more. Come on. But yeah, it's like I wanted to make it where it's like, this is not a story for kids. You know, if kids want to read it, you know, go ahead, awesome. But this is the story for adults, and it just, there's going to be kids being mean to each other and saying some nasty things, which is fun. Because you got the adult situations. It's interesting because you have different almost of life where you have the teenager, and so you have some high school shenanigans going on, and then you have kind of a millennial, and you have, that's the reporter, and you have her kind of working in kind of like a Daily Beast type, Wire type website, and her kind of the whole crux of her thing is that she gets the opportunity of a lifetime. She gets to interview the Avengers, which is crazy, you know? And it's kind of like a situation of, this was supposed to be not just a puff piece, not a puff piece, but it's kind of like to humanize them, kind of like, hey, here's who we are. And it's interesting, the stuff she sees and the stuff she finds out, them still trying to fight for relevancy against, like I mentioned before, the teen team of these, they're funded by this like Disney like organization.
They're not
And
superheroes.
or as one of the that's what he calls them. He actually calls them overpowered prostitutes. So
before Disney bought Marvel.
Yeah, and so stuff like that. But the thing is, there is a central that event that happens. It's the central event, and that is, it's not just their individual stories, but it links the three of them, and it actually has some I don't want to spoil it, but it's like it has some devastating implications as the story goes on, and it actually goes into book 2 because that's how big of a story it is. It's a big deal, and we're seeing these characters as they evolve. Like one of them is just in particularly the teenager. I think the thing about his story that I find really fascinating, it was probably I put it like, it's kind of like, even though he has powers, it's kind of like a coming of age story for him, where a lot of times I've noticed, and this is not like this is not a slight on the other stories, but sometimes I notice when you have these characters who are kind of like, maybe they're not the most socialized when they're kids, and then all of a sudden, and then they just get all, get everything they want, but where's the actual development? And it's kind of like, just because you have powers doesn't mean everything's going to work out. It's almost kind of like you get money, life's going to be better. Not necessarily. I mean, you look at these lotto winners. Some of them are more miserable now when they have money than they did before. And so it's kind of like him kind of needing to evolve and become a man.
Yeah.
Because this is a character who he suffered tragedy in his life. He's lost his father. His father committed suicide, like probably about a year before the events of the book, or maybe about 9 months.
Something there that is super important to both the superhero genre and also like urban fantasy and things like that deal with people in the real world who have these special abilities.
Yeah,
I think a lot of times people or writers get hung up on the abilities and less on the human, spirit that is carrying those things around. Because just because you get powers doesn't mean, like if you're a teenager, that doesn't mean you've been on your first date or kissed your first girl or had sex for the first time or any of that stuff. That's still going to be a stressor for you trying to grow up,
Yeah.
It
what
doesn't mean
if
your boyfriend's not abusing her or whatever. I mean,
Exactly.
a lot of times they overlook the human behind the superhuman.
Or it's boilerplate, and then they don't really do anything with it once they get powers. And like one of the things too, also, I give some development to the love interest that he has, at least in book 1, because a lot of times it's this, like when I was watching Smallville, one of the most annoying things was with Lana Lang is they made her perfect. She's perfect in every single way. And to the point where I called her a princess on a pedestal, because she almost didn't become, she wasn't even a person anymore. She was just an object to be fetishized and rescued and drooled over. And so I was like, what if you have it where he kind of almost does that, but we kind of find out who this character is, this person? Like, what if we find out that she's kind of a mean girl?
Yeah,
has her own little squad. She's kind of like Taylor Swift. She has her own squad of like people, and she's kind of nice to a degree, but she's a mean girl. But what if, what else do we have with it? She has kind of body dysmorphia to a degree, even though she's this beautiful girl. She's not a cheerleader. She's actually on tennis. So she's like an athlete. Well, cheerleaders are athletes too, but she's like a, varsity athlete. So there's all these things that she's worrying about too. And also at the same time, she knows who this kid is. It's not like she's never seen him before. It's kind of the situation where she treats him like crap when in front of her friends and in front of other people, but when it's just the two of them, it's completely different. So you see these nuances and these layers of these characters.
Yeah.
And it's him maybe kind of, at first he worships her, and then maybe there's a turn. Maybe he sees something that's like, ooh, I didn't know that. Or maybe people were trying to tell me that, and now I'm really seeing it with different eyes. Yeah. So you see those kind of different character, and you see him like, because it's him, he's the oldest, and he's got a younger brother, and he's got the teenage character. He's got a younger brother, and he's got his mom, and his mom is kind of like now has to support these two kids by herself because her husband's no longer with them.
Right.
So dealing with that and that grief that still lingers, particularly with him, even though, he's dealing with this grief, but he's never allowed himself to be angry about it. And now that he has powers, he's angry at his father because he's just like, he left us. even though, you know, and it's completely fair to feel that way. I've never lost anyone that close to me, but it's just having somebody be angry with that person who left them and him dealing with that grief in his own way, even if it's maybe not the healthiest ways, but him no longer repressing himself when it comes to that part of his character.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting that you know, because you have like superheroes like Superman who don't really, I mean, they kind of deal with human issues, but they don't really, because they don't really have to worry about that, right?
No.
Batman kind of does, but he's also a gazillionaire, so he does whatever he wants.
Well, he's still 8 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
And really, when you boil it down, he's kind of an asshole.
Hey, I mean, you really
little bit. He plays dress up and he punches people.
Yeah.
Which that's every Tuesday night at my house.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
one of the questions I had was, you touch a lot of the character aspect of the hero and a lot of the stuff that you might not necessarily get from a superhero, a modern superhero story where you're just talking about like the action and so you mentioned that they come into powers, that they get powers. Do we explore this superhero? I mean, for lack of a better term, magic system where you have these superheroes that have these powers. Do we explore it in any way? Is it something that's as concrete where, like in Mistborn, you have to ingest something to use a power, or is it like kind of they just have it and it just happens and now we use it? Like what went into the creation of that superhero-esque magic system that you've created?
So what I do is there was an event, a mysterious event. I don't want to give too much away because it's going to be explained a little more in book 4, but there's an event that happened probably about a couple of decades before the events of the book, where we call it like the global whiteout. There was some event that happened, and then after that, where the sky turned completely white, no matter where in the world you were. And then all of a sudden, superpowered people started popping up. And they're probably about maybe 4 or 5% of the entire global population. And so that's, of course, there was a it's a couple million. And that's the thing. It's like it started kind of almost a global arms race of superhumans. And you started seeing people with superpowers. And then you started seeing super teams. And there are actually other superheroes from the past that we kind of hint at and talk about, like, hey, this kind of happened back here. So we hint at kind of the history of this world to a degree. I talk about it when it's needed because a lot of it is kind of like, well, okay, that's not the story that I wanted. That's not the story.
Right.
That's not the focus of these characters. Like, as much as I love world building more than like anyone, but one of the things I'm trying to learn to do with this story is like, let's have the world building where it makes sense according to what's being focused on in the story.
Sure.
So like, I'd love to do like prequel series where we talk about this whole thing and spin-offs where we just do that. But I wanted for this series, it's focused mainly on these 3 characters and their journeys and them entering this strange new world that they're in.
So as an author, how do you identify spots where, like saying, where you need to explain the world more, and then figure out where you're going too far and doing too much explaining and not enough, like seeding in little clues and letting the reader figure them out for yourself? How do you think?
Well, I think with, like, for instance, there's a couple characters, and the rogue characters. I think you've all encountered a rogue character in your stories where they were just like, they did this small thing, and then all of a sudden they became much more important. It's learning how to harness those well. So, like, for instance, there's a character who I think it's one of the, so for the hero or the teenager, or at least the hero as far as we know for book 1, he might not be a hero in book 2. For the teenage character, there's one of the mean girls who's part of the love interest squad. And initially she just seems like your garden variety, mean girl. And as the series progresses, there's more to her. And there's a history to this character that, I don't want to say too much, but there's this character actually more to the table than we expected. And that's going to affect one of the characters in a very unique way. And like, even for instance, huh? Did I get all serious? Well, just like, I want to make sure, like, I don't want to give away too much. Like, a lot of times, I think, Josh, you know me, I get really excited, like I tell too much, and so I'm just like, let me scale it back so it's not too much. Because I want to make sure
hold on to it, CC. You gotta hold on.
I gotta hold on, man. But yeah, I think there was like a scene one time. Okay, I can tell this. This is like not a huge spoiler. There's a scene like in book 2 where
we like to give spoiler alerts after you've given the
spoiler. Right. Oh, that was
spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So there's it's a scene where there's one kind of veteran hero who's talking about a superhero team he was part of, and he's kind of mentoring this new generation of heroes, and he's kind of telling them like, hey, here's what happened to my team. That's one of the reasons why there's not a lot of superheroes in this section, because of this event that happened. It was called the Chicago Massacre, and it's mentioned in book 1. You hear a little about it here and there, and then he kind of explains as to what happened. And you actually even hear from, I think there was, it affected the other character, the teenage character as well. Like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. And sometimes it's also great when you see these events from different lenses, because it gives you also the unreliable narrator. Where, like, I think a great example of this was in the Song of Ice and Fire series, A Feast for Crows. So there is this thing that got reported. We initially first hear about it in King's Landing, where, oh, the Hound, like Sandor Clegane, he's back and he's slaughtering people. Him and his reavers wiped out this town. And then you hear that from King's Landing, and they immediately just like, oh, it makes sense, the mountain that rides. And then Jaime's in the Riverlands. He hears about it, and he's just like, that doesn't quite sound like, that sounds more like Gregor Clegane, the mountain. That doesn't sound like something Sandor would do. And then you're like right near the town, and then there's another POV character, and there's somebody's just like, yeah, it wasn't the Hound. It wasn't him. It was somebody dressed up as him. And the great thing about that is that you have, like, you see, like, the further away, like, the more the story spreads, the more fantastical, the more, like, people start adding their own things, the more it starts to grow legs in its own way. And that's one of the things that I kind of want to do with this series, where it's like you hear this thing, you see, maybe even you see it happen, and then somebody else hears it, and they hear it, and it's been so muddled and so transmuted, it's like it doesn't even barely resembles the original story. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I wanted to add into this as well.
One of the coolest things that I think an author can do for a reader and for a group of readers is to give them just enough information where they can, like, draw their own conclusions or
yes.
kind of like make up, because like with like you're just saying, Song of Ice and Fire, there are so many theories out there that aren't in the book, like just drawn from events that are hinted at in the books or just kind of just barely touched on. And there's these just huge followings of these people that are breaking down these theories and trying to figure out exactly what George R. R. Martin was trying to say, or what is actually going on with the characters. And who knows if he's ever going to say it. But the cool thing is that, but really that, and even if he finishes the books, who knows if he's ever going to answer those questions, right? Like if he's actually going to come out and say this and this and this. But I think I think you should ask or present questions in your books for your readers that you don't have any intention on answering.
I totally want to do that.
Not about
great.
Not about the actual story, not about the story that you're telling.
Like stuff. There's none of us know what the atomic weight of cobalt is just off the top of our heads, right? I mean, just little stuff like that you might bring up that never gets in, but not like core.
Okay, so for instance,
no, definitely not.
For instance,
definitely not core stuff.
Like for 5 books, we don't know what the Doom of Valyria is in A Song of Ice and Fire. They just refer to it as the Doom. Like every time they mention the Doom of Valyria, it's the Doom. Well, we don't find out until book 5 that it was a volcano that erupted and covered everything.
That's true.
But even if he had just left it as the Doom of Valyria and never explained that it was a volcano that erupted, that doesn't affect the story that he's telling, but it lets people come up with all these different, like, what has happened with the Doom, and it doesn't matter whether they're Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's
And
what I
why is
mean.
it-
Like not.
and why is it haunted? And there's actually, it's funny you say it because there actually is something. There was one or two things that I did in book 3 where I kind of have this kind of mystery, and I'm curious if people kind of catch on. I'm gonna answer it by the end of the book, but I'm curious if people will catch on exactly what exactly it is, because I kind of hint like, oh, I drop a hint here, drop a hint there, drop a hint there, and that's actually kind of fun when you get to do that, and you kind of have confidence in your ability to be able to do that and see if people catch on and enjoy it.
Sort of thing, like when you get the readers who reread your work and they're like,
Yes.
"Oh, I did not see that the first time," and then they're really onto it, and then they're like, "I need to read this a third time to see this fucker hit anything else in here."
And going back, it's funny, going back to A Song of Ice and Fire, I remember when, I really liked the first book and I enjoyed it, and then I enjoyed it so much for forums where people were talking about it, and then I found the whole Jon Snow theory, and I was just like, wait, what? And then I went back and reread all of Ned's chapters, and I was just like, oh my God, it's like right there.
It's right there.
Right there. Yeah. It's like you can't unsee it after that. So
and one of the cool, I like what you're saying, like rereading it, like when you reread Stormlight Archive, which is a massive undertaking because the books are so big, but you read it through the first time and it's a really good story, but you read it the second time and there's so many, same thing with Mistborn, there's so many little itty bitty things that you read and you're like, yeah, that's neat. But then you read it a second time and you read it and you're like, oh, and like, so that's, it's funny that I try to do a little bit of that with Edge of Valor, and the first time you read it, you read the story, and with Edge of Valor, there's POVs that are unreliable that are telling you the story of this mission that failed, and so when you read it, you're like, yeah, that's good, you're telling a story, but then if you go back and read it the second, like everybody's lying, right? Like we have to figure out why they're lying. But then when you read it the second time, you can see where they're lying and why they're lying about it. Like
that's cool.
Just in the way that you might not be able to pick it up the first time, but after you know what happened at the end and you know the truth, if you go back and reread it the second time, then you'll be able to see, oh, that's where he was lying. He exaggerated right there. He couldn't have seen that because he was over here, but you don't know that the first time through. So like that, and who knows if anybody's going to reread it. But I did it purposely because I know that I've done that with books before where I go back and reread and I'm like, oh wow, that blew my mind.
And there's a mystery that I have in the book that I kind of spread out through the first 4 books, and that's a real fun one, and I'm curious as to how people will respond once that gets revealed. That'll be a big blockbuster, kind of a game changer. I know game changer's been overused, but it'll be a game changer for the series.
So CC, with all this plot thinking that you do you before you go in, or are you putting this kind of cool stuff in during the revision stage? Like after you got your draft done, you go back in, do you put it in then?
It's kind of a mix. Like I'm a plotter. I like to plot, but a lot of times I'll be in a situation where, well, I'm a plotter when it comes to full-length books. Short story, I'm more pantsing. But when it comes to full-length books, I'll plot. I won't meticulously put out everything because I want a little flexibility and looseness. But sometimes, a lot of times what will happen is I will get actually to the chapter that I've plotted out, or chapters, and then I'm kind of like, I'm feeling something different, and I'll always go with my gut. I'll trust my gut, like, okay, I'm in the weeds now. I'm seeing where this led. I feel I need to go a different way. And even also, it's funny that you say that, during editing, that's usually where I kind of come to really love my stories, because that's when you kind of really see it and you shape it. You really shape it in a certain way. And yeah, I will add certain things during those parts where I'll be like, ooh, I can add this here. Ooh, I can add that. And so the editing is actually really fun that way, where you get to do that and you get to shape different things that you might have not thought out initially.
Yes, your ugly conglomerate of mush, and then you're like, I'm gonna give you a pretty face, and we're gonna make this nice. Yes, I love that.
Oh yeah, you pretty it up, and it looks beautiful. It's kind of like Pimp My Ride. It's like Pimp My Manuscript.
There you
go. Yeah, I just aged myself. Yes.
Come on, exhibit.
Exactly. Nice.
I just want to point this out because I just noticed this. Does anybody else think it's cool as hell that we're talking about like these mysterious superhero things, and CC's like talking in this like dim, like dark, mysterious place that we don't know exactly where he's
My
at.
lair.
He's got
Honestly,
like the CC bat signal behind him, like
drumming my fingers, trying to take over the world.
Changing. I kept thinking, is he in Afghanistan or something? The way it keeps pixelating and stuff. Is he that far away?
I'm like Jim Hellwig. I'm from Parts Unknown. Yeah.
So I want to
WWE reference there, Lauren. Yeah,
so
I
I want
figured.
to ask your favorite question that I haven't heard too often on the Keystroke Show. What was your favorite secondary character to write?
oh, nice pickup for Scott.
Pick up for Scott there.
Good. I'd say some of my favorite secondary characters to write were the reporter and the best friend of the teenager. Because with those characters, it's like even though they're like just they're not blood related, that's family. And even when they have arguments and there's maybe a brief falling out, that's still your family. Like with the best friend, that's like his brother. It's a guy who stuck by him even when all the other friends didn't, and when all the other friends weren't there. That's his ride or die. And I love writing those characters because it informs you a lot about the main character when you have that supporting character. It's a person who they can be themselves around. They can be their true self, whether they have a costumed identity, whether they have a professional identity. This is the person that knows you in and out and will call you out on your shit. And so with the teenager, his character's name's Hugo. I'll be a little more forthcoming about that. His name's Hugo. He's got a best friend named Simon Hahn. And he's the guy who's kind of like, they're both kind of superhero nerds. They kind of know everything about superhero out there. And he's the guy, he's like one of the first people he's like the first person he calls when his powers, manifest. And he shows him, and it's funny because once he's kind of, even though he doesn't really know his full scope, they're just like, oh, well, what if you can fly? And they kind of like totally geek out about that. They have a moment where they're like hopping up and down with the possibility of flying. And with the reporter, she's got this best friend from college. They've known each other for 7 years. And to the point where it's like, she's the one who kind of encourages her to kind of like, yeah, you want to do this? Go ahead, please. Yeah, please, And it's interesting, like the first scene, the first chapter that we see these characters, you see the reporter and her best friend, they're out she's doing like a restaurant review. And it's this place that's kind of like this fusion Spanish and like Indian food. And it's called like Baja Bollywood or something. And then, yeah, I know it's totally lame on purpose.
No, I like it.
And then what happens while they're there, and the best friend is kind of like, oh yeah, I'm getting married. She's getting engaged. And it plays out like something you'd see in like maybe a rom-com. And then outside there's like a superhero battle that's doing. And so the reporter person she literally runs out and starts covering the superhero battle.
I'm so sorry. That's great. I gotta go.
Yeah, and she's just like, get us more of that wine. Get us more of that wine. And the best friend's just like, yeah. The best friend's just kind of like, yeah, just don't die. You need to be my maid of honor. And she's like, noted. So again, that's like they know each other so well, and it's just that I love writing those secondary characters. And another secondary character I liked writing was the Batman pastiche, because he's basically, I put it like this. One of the things about Batman, like I had a friend of mine who's a bigger geek than even me, and probably you, Chuck, and he basically wrote. I know. He actually works for the game company, Spider-Man game. So yeah, he's a huge geek. Yeah. And so basically, he wrote this tirade about why Batman sucks. And I have not been able to look at Batman the same after that tirade, because I'm like, oh my God, he's like so right. I cannot unsee that.
Don't say that.
There's an argument to be made there. I'm sorry. I agree with it. There's an argument to be made there.
Yeah, I have to find it, because when he said it, I was just like, I cannot unsee it. So this Batman pastiche is kind of made in the vein of like, okay, let me correct those flaws that you noticed. And let's face it, Batman, well, he is a sociopath, but this guy would be a completely antisocial sociopath, and he like has a rule. Like he's not like going around murdering. He's not Punisher, but there's a certain type of criminal that he does kind of like, okay, you get 2 strikes and then we're getting rid of you. And he's an urban myth to some people. The police know about him and they're hunting him secretly. Most superheroes know about him, and he's secretly best friends with like the Superman pastiche of this world. Like the Superman pastiche can't be like, oh yeah, he's my buddy, he's great. He's got to condemn him. He's like, if he exists, I condemn him. But they like kind of have this thing, and this is the first chapter of the book where they actually meet. It's kind of like 2 ships passing in the night, where it's morning, so the Batman pastiche's shift is ending, and then it's morning, so that means the Superman pastiche, his shift is beginning. So it's kind of like they kind of have a small commune, and then they go their separate ways.
Nice.
Bonding over coffee.
Yeah, coffee or just superhero stuff. You know, superhero business.
Superhero coffee.
Superhero coffee. Some morning Joe or morning Hayes.
A little jingle.
Morning Hay. I like that. Okay, so I've got 2 questions, and they're very random, and I have them in my handy dandy notebook, and I've been meaning to ask our guests these questions for like months. And if everybody knows me, they know how unorganized I am. And in my notebook that's supposed to be organized, I heard these questions on a podcast several months ago, and I'm like, that'd be totally wicked cool if we asked the guests these questions. So flash super fast round. Here's the first question. What is the biggest mammal you can knock out with a single punch?
No one can disprove you. Go big. CC.
That's right. No one. This is not a true false.
Any animal, he says. I mean,
yeah. What is the biggest mammal you can knock out with a single punch?
Land or sea?
No. Yeah, it has to be. No, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Mammal, but it has to be a single punch knockout.
Okay. I go with a black bear.
Oh, a black bear.
That's ambitious, man. I like it. Yeah.
And the crazy thing about that is if it doesn't work with the single punch, you're screwed. Like,
I don't know. Black bears are they're the ones that'll run away. The brown bears are the ones that'll jack you up.
That's the problem. It's like if I punch it, it'll just swipe me with its bear claw, and that'll be a problem. All right,
what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? So what he gets eaten by the bear?
Oh, The Revenant.
That was Revenant. Yeah. That was brutal. Wow, that was brutal.
Corvo in the chat says camel.
Oh, camel. Wait, one hump or 2? Because there's a difference. Okay, the second question: toilet paper, over or under?
Ooh, that's a good one. How do you hang your toilet paper? Over?
How do you hang your Is it over the front or over the back? Toilet paper, over or under?
I always go
the way it hangs on the roll. Oh yeah, definitely over. That's the correct answer. You have passed. And you may now come back on the show at a later time. If you had answered incorrectly, you would have been banned from henceforth coming on.
Bomb.
But you have passed. CC, thanks so much for coming on the show again, man. And a short notice, I apologize, but it was great fun having you on the show, man.
And thanks for having me. But 2 things I wanted to bring up before you go. I have to
3 questions.
I have to thank Kalene, because Kalene, for Age of Heroes, Kalene did a rework of my blurb, and it's awesome. And I ran it by some fans and readers, and they loved it. And 2, Josh, I owe you a huge one, because you're the one who helped me find the cover artist I used to do my redo for book 1, the cover. So thank you so much for that. So
absolutely.
That was great. I remember I just put it up and people was like, oh my God, that's a sexy cover. And I was like, it couldn't happen without Morning Days, without Josh. So I wanted to thank you both for that, because it was very much appreciated. You guys helped make my book better, and the success will be yours.
You're absolutely welcome. Anytime I can help. I got you.
Cool.
Peace.
It is a pretty sexy cover, and if you do share it in the Keystroke group, so everybody can see it in the Keystroke group after, because it's a really cool cover. Everybody in the live chat, including Corvo, thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. As always, there was a lot of shenanigans. If you're not watching live and you're listening on the audio feed, come and catch us on Mondays or Thursdays. Kalene and Lauren have a fantastic show on Thursdays, which I think sometimes rivals live in the amount of information that you would get. A lot of times I listen to the show and I'm like, man, we rambled a lot on Monday, and then we get to Thursday.
Yeah, I was going to say rivals. I don't know if that's the right word.
Well, we get to Thursday and you learn so much from the Thursday show, and then Monday it's just like
fun.
I don't even know.
Fun.
Yeah, Oh yeah,
and
it's fun on Monday, educational on Thursday.
Yeah, I see you guys, because you guys are doing it from a writer's journey perspective, and I think that's amazing, because it's just like, hey, if you're starting out or wherever you are on the road, this is resources, and here's some stuff that you can learn, and that's great. That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, and they generally stay sober when they do their show, so that helps.
I'm also very jealous of their theme music and their professionalism. So yes, watch Thursdays on the Writer's Journey. Let's see what we got coming up. What do we have on the Writer's Journey this week, Lauren?
John De La Rose.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
we're talking about crowdfunding, right?
Yes, crowdfunding. Yeah.
Very cool.
Should be an interesting topic. One of which I know very little of, so I'm really excited to explore that and dig deep. And
that's right. He did that. Him and I think Richard Fox did that for the Amber War comic that they did, right?
Yeah, he's done a couple of Kickstarters for comics. He did one for the Amber War that was successful. He's doing one for, gosh, I can't remember what the comic is called, but he's doing one for one of his own personal comics, I think.
Okay.
I'm sure they'll talk about it on Thursday. And mark your calendars too for the 27th of April. On the 27th of April, we're doing Covers for a Cure 3. We have Tom Edwards, we have Jamie Glover, both doing fantastic covers. Hopefully tomorrow I will get some sample covers up. The mech that Jamie has, it's not going to be on one of the covers that he gets, but it's an example. The mech that he has done, ridiculous, like holy crap. It's the coolest looking mech I've ever seen in my life, and he's got this. Do what?
Do we lose Josh?
Oh, I thought you said something. No, am I there?
Yeah, you're good.
You're freezing for a second.
The mech that he did for this the sample cover is fantastic, and I think the covers that he's going to do for the auction are going to be just as badass. So if you're going to be in the market this year at all for covers, come hang out with us on the 27th. It's a Saturday. It's going to be 1 p.m. Central, so 2 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to have at least five covers to auction off. CC, you were on the first Covers for a Cure, weren't you? Didn't you participate in the first one, or maybe it was the second one?
I did. I was on the second one. I didn't. I don't know if I bought any. Maybe I did.
I can't remember if you did.
Maybe
it's for a great cause. Matt Young is a detective on our police department. Just got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Ouch.
And so we are doing Covers for a Cure for him this year. We're going to be donating through a nonprofit 501c3 through our local police union, so we don't have to worry about taxes, and he doesn't have to worry about taxes. So 100% of everything that we raise through the thing is going to be given to Matt Young's family. Perfect. So if you're going to be in the market for a cover, we're going to have an edit. We're going to have some formatting packages as well. It's going to be a really fun event, and we're going to raise some good money for Matt and his family. So do that on April 27th. Yeah, and then look forward for our near future anthology that's in edits right now. Ellen is ripping to shreds these stories, and I really feel sorry for the authors that are going to get their stories back from Ellen. I'm just kidding. She does a really good job. Everybody that come and hang out with us tonight, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us during the live show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our videos around, and let people know where you get your fun, motivating entertainment writing wise from. CC, thank you again so much for coming on, sir.
Thanks for having me.
CC, enjoyed geeking out with you, brother.
Likewise.
Yeah. For Lauren, Kalene, and Chuck, I am Josh Hayes. You have been live right here on Keystroke Medium. Make sure you come back next time. We're going to be talking about some writing, maybe some reading, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.